Hi everyone, for coming to this first live taped edition of Crit Club. I will just do like a little introduction before we start because it's a kind of like a particular concept, let's say. Crit Club is a performance where, in this case, 4 speakers debate a question about art, but it's intentionally an unrealistic question. And this will be the first live taping of it. And I mean, we are all kind of used to the kind of boring nature of panel discussions, and like people don't want to go too far. There is a lot at stake, and you kind of hesitate to kind of you filter a lot when you speak in public, and it's hard to say that a panel discussion could actually even change anything because it's it's an isolated format. So instead, I thought, what if we ask the speakers an unrealistic question, so that at least the conversation could be interesting and critical? And can we create a thought experiment where all speakers can actually openly disagree with each other, which is something I think we rarely see in the art world? And how can we also like perform our sort of like art world roles in this tongue-in-cheek scenario? I think that's also quite curious. And yeah, I think we kind of have to accept that. Sorry, my mask is going up. I apologize for the disguise. And yeah, like, I mean, the art world is a inherently fundamentalist and sectarian space. There is a lot of polarization in the art world, and I think it's curious to see how the speakers can uphold their understanding of the art world in this difficult or this like doomsday scenario, let's say. And it will be curious to see if they can embrace the scenario, or do they defy to kind of get out of the boundaries of the question itself. And after all, the main question is like, how can we actually turn this performative disagreement into a space of agreement, actually, also like both between the speakers and also with the audience and like within the audience. And it's hard to say that there is any direct competition in the art world, but at the same time, it will be too naive to say that the art world is not a competitive place. And my hope with this format is to kind of create a competition where the spirit of competition kind of elevates all of its participants. And as you might have already seen, or as Stephanie already explained, that the debate today will be on artists and artworks. So we have Jitish, Cara, Steph, and Tuo here, and they will debate whether artworks or artists are more important. Jitish and Cara will argue that artists are more important than artworks in this false binary. And Steph and Tuo will argue that it's in fact the opposite, and artworks are more important than artists. And I should note that we are not really like looking for a clear winner here. I think that's not the outcome that we wish to have out of this conversation. But it's more about illustrating one's one's thinking abilities and to articulate their arguments and kind of try to come up with out-of-the-box arguments in this scenario. But still, I'm a bit curious to see how the audience would side in this question. So could you raise your hand if you think that artworks are more important than artists? Okay, we have a few. And what about artists more important than artworks? Okay, it's kind of 50-50, I think, right? Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was hoping for. That's great. And we can also do a vote afterwards to see if anyone's opinion changed. But let's see. So, Jitish, would you like to start?
Sure.
You can have
Thanks, Cem, and thanks, Stephanie, for this very sort of idiosyncratic invitation. It's unlike anything that ever came through my email, and I thought, it'd be good to participate in what seems like one is being invited or rather ushered into a kind of dichotomous thinking of picking a side around a question that is already pronounced unrealistic, right? Already pronounced to be without resolution or without end. And I know why you say that, because in one glimpse, of course, this question does look like you're being invited into a Penrose staircase, you know, that whether you ascend or descend, you'll find yourself in the same spot, right? But I think all of us will have to collectively take this Penrose staircase off the paper, you know, and see if that illusion holds, you know. Is it truly an unrealistic question? Or does it sort of appear like the poultry puzzle? You know, does it just appear like the old chicken and egg question in the poultry farm? You know, did the chicken come first or the egg come first? And the reason we have no answer to that conundrum is because they come out of the same metabolic, biological, reproductive cycle. Both the chicken and egg. The egg cracks open a chicken and chicken drops the egg, so we can't quite tell. But I think for our question, we should ideally explore it collectively with first principles, right? Not with first impression or first intuition or what we might like it to be, what it seems like, right? So if one wants to really ask a question, you know, what are artworks? What is this thing that we do, right? Then we come to a question that we awaken to an impulse, an intuition, an insight, an inquiry that collectively becomes like this kind of flux that then propels us, the subject, the artist, to take steps in the world. You know, we might recognize something, and that's the whole logic of the found object. We might find it, or we might reorganize the world. You know, we might restructure music, a sound, you know, it'll drop into a symphony, become music. We reorganize actions in time and space, it becomes a performance. You know, all of us as visual artists, we're always moving molecules, whether it's moving documents out of an archive into a museum or squeezing paint tubes to find meaning and to make meaning, right? But we are propelled by that initial impulse that happens in a kind of subjective domain. And we ferry that subjective exercise into the object. So the subject, in that sense, always precedes the object. So in fact, the chicken and egg conundrum here will not apply simply because the birth of the object is incumbent on the subject. The birth of the artwork is necessarily an outcome of the artist. You know, so there is, in a way, we are talking of two different cycles here. It's not the same metabolic lineage that you have for the chicken and egg. And hence, I might submit that that artists actually matter more. And I say this in complete honoring of not the figure of the artist, but the sort of subjective ground space, which is the space of all insight, all creativity, all intellectual labor, whether it's launching a spacecraft into space or making a sculpture. It's the same impulse that drives the process of making. And so in this subject and object question, I submit, I just see a single answer.
Yeah, thank you for your very thorough introduction to the debate. Steph or Tuo, would you like to respond from the opposition?
Hello, my name is Steph. Could controller turn to the slide I made? Just go before the. So I think this is really tricky question. What's matter, the artist or the hour? For me, that I believe that the hour is more important than the artist because. Can you turn? So, but if there's a fire, who will you save? So you turned the next page, and next more fires. So who will you save? So that's the questions like definite like. So maybe the slice is a bit slow. So if you turn the next one, more fire, and then Then the final one is, so definitely you're going to save the artist, right? But does that mean that artist is more important? No, but we don't know. So next page, please. So when you are talking about the narrative, I don't think sometimes I think the narrative is sometimes overrated. And then when we are talking about the hunter and the gatherers, so it's always written in a story about the hunter. It's always get the credit in the story, but the people who's like foraging all the fruit, they contribute, like the society, they don't really being mentioned. So my point is that artists tend to want to be like themselves as the hunter. They want to be like in the spotlight. But I think that the artwork is much more important because artists are doing the same thing. It's just like they are kind of deliver the culture and kind of like cultural exchange to the people. And there's lots of example about different generations, like people people are doing like humble work, and then it's not about the status. That's what I think, and I think that the artwork is much more important than the artist. Yeah.
Thank you. Cara, would you like to respond? You can also all have your microphones, by the way. You don't have to share, but
sharing is caring. I quite like it.
it's all good.
I disagree. Unfortunately, Jitish already said everything that I was going to say. So, I think that the artist is more important than the artwork because I am obviously much more important than my silly little artworks. I don't think that you can remove the artist from the artwork as well. I think that people might disagree with me with this, but I feel like you can always see the artist in the artwork. It's a bit like, has anyone seen 101 Dalmatians? You know, at the animation at the start where they like show all the owners and their dogs, and all the owners look like their dogs and the dogs look like the owners. I feel like that is what artists are like with their artworks. There's always you can see their personality in the artwork. And so that is why the artist is more important. Let me just check what else I have to say. I was also going to say about the chicken and the egg, because you are like the mother of the artworks as well. And mothers are really important. Far more important than the children. What else? Oh, yeah. In terms of the artist always being within the artwork, you are like the creator of this thing, and I feel like your whole psyche and every decision you make as you are making an artwork comes through this filter of you and your perspective and your sort of being. So you might think that you are making an artwork that is purely based on a concept, but it's not. It's always coming through this filter of you. When I make sculptures, I find that when I'm making decisions about stuff, you can think that you're making a decision based on your research and things that are outside of yourself, but all of those decisions are based on your experiences and everything that's sort of come through. And when you're making sculptures, I often think it's like, I've got a friend who's training to be a counselor at the moment, and she told me about this exercise that they do with their clients. Is that what you call it? Client? Person? Whoever they're giving therapy to. And it's called the button test. And you have like a bowl of buttons, and the therapist will ask the person to sort of pick buttons and like say, how does this one relate to this one? Who is this button? And they come up with this sort of story. And I feel like as sculptors, that's what you're doing with objects. You're kind of picking materials, and you're picking objects and the things that you want to include in the sculpture. And it becomes a kind of, I think it becomes a sort of psychological test as to what decisions you make as you go. So the artist is more important. Thank you.
I should say something. I disagree. So yeah, this is a really tough question, and so when I read about the email that I have to choose one side, I think okay, this is like a suicide question, right? It's like a and I have to divide this question into like two parts. One part is like during the process of making, and another part is during the process of making. I think, of course, it's like a mother and son question, or hen and the eggs question, right? It's all about the creator and the creation. So of course, if there's no creator, there's no creation. But if we look at this question as this is like a post-making, I think it's a totally another question. So I have to go back to my personal experience. When we look back the history of entire art history, it's like what kind of thing gets you every time. It's our works. It's a piece of painting. It's not about that famous artist's gossip and or the legendary life, and because when we look all those gossip of the historical artists, we know that okay, this is not a good person. This is not a good human being, and they're just like a simply a chaser of fame and fortune, and or we can put this question into a new question that which one you prefer? You prefer a great artwork without an artist, or you prefer a great artist without any good artworks? I think that's another question. I always prefer. I think if we look back the entire human civilization as a whole part of the history, as how we progressed in our history, what matters more? It's always like the science is more important, or the scientist is more important. So I think the history is built up on those milestones, and of course those milestones are made by those people, but eventually the milestones are milestones. They're not people. And also I have another example. It's very personal. It's like 2 years ago when just about the time, it was just about the time the Russia invasion started, and some friends of mine in China, and they're from the film industry, they started to think about, they want to organize a program to invite like young film directors to make a bunch of short films to support Ukraine. And I think they made a very strong statement. I think the statement is super nice. But, I have to say, I have to be honest, when I look at the final program, a lot of artists, they made like a 10 minutes long short films. Those videos are powerless. And then those powerless films it's almost like a proof that, art is powerless. So I think if the artwork is powerless, no matter how strong your statement is, it's nothing. So if you have a strong artwork, that's the strongest statement. It's much more than anything else. It's much more than an artist as being a famous celebrity or something. Yeah. And if artist is much more important, I think just it's giving people a lot of excuses to keep chasing fame and fortune. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think that was a very thorough analysis, and I think it's interesting to think about it in terms of both the time frame. I think that's one topic maybe you could explore as well, about how could you justify this question in both like a, let's say, shorter term and longer term, and also the influence of artworks over artists is interesting. But I think Jitish would like to add something.
Yeah, I think what we've done is we've made an appeal to concession. We've just changed the question. Like what you're suggesting is the question is not what matters more, the artist or the artwork. I think the question, as per what you've just spoken, is what matters more, the artist or the artwork once the artwork is made. Right? So the question has just been extended. So I think in a way, what it does is it's an a priori assumption that the artwork is going to self-generate in the world. My appeal was to really look at where does this impulse come from? Where does the impulse to make art come from? And if existence is a precondition for even evaluating relevance, then from that perspective, I'm submitting that subject precedes the object. And in fact, I think even to your point, which is actually a very charming image of fire, the question is, once again, who decides what to save? That decision of, am I going to save the artist or the artwork, is the site of human volition. It's a site of intuition. Maybe somebody will save the artwork, maybe somebody will save the artist. But the person who decides, it's the same site of action from which all labor is perpetuated on the world that then produces the world. That's what produces the work. That's what produces the art. So in fact, we are again going back to the point that we have to address the subject as the site of all insight, all creativity. We can go all around Art Basel, Hong Kong, level 1 and level 3, and you may not find a single artwork made in 1967 by an artist born in 1940 or 1994, right? So it always precedes the making of the work, right? So yeah, so I just say that the question was slightly altered in what you said, because you're making the assumption that the artwork now exists, and then you revise and analyze it. But we have to really put them as a single question without the assumption that the artwork already exists, just as the artist exists.
But I'm still believe that the artwork is much more important than the artist, is because when I was a kid, I remember I went to the museum. At that time, I don't know much about different artists, and I was looking at a painting, and at the end, I realized that it's Cy Twombly's painting. And then, but I was a kid, I was looking at the purity of the paintings, and I don't even really look after his biography. And then, there are many artists in the world, like we know, like Picasso is not a nice person. Lucien Floyd is not a nice person, but those artworks just like cost like millions of pounds. So does that mean that the artist is more important than artwork when you think about just looking how amazing was like the lines, the gesture, the color on it, not thinking about the biographic part?
Oh, I've got one thing to say, but you can please cut in. I was going to say, in terms of Picasso's artwork still being really expensive, they got a lot more expensive after Picasso died, so artist is more important. Because when they're gone, they can't make any more, because there's only one artist, but while they're alive, they can keep making the artworks. So there's potentially an infinite, well, okay, not infinite. The amount of artwork that there can be is limited by the lifespan of the artist. What else do I have to say? Oh yeah, I was also thinking about us finding out more about the context of the artist sort of afterwards, and us sort of like I'm sort of learning about how Picasso was not a nice guy. And I think that does change the way that you see the artwork as well. Because now when you look at a Picasso, you think about all of these things, you have a different experience of the artwork. And I think that That happens with all artwork. This is why people want to find out what was going on in the life of the artist at the time, because you want to know why they made that painting. Why did they do this? Like, why were they painting this? And it all becomes more of a story when you find out the context of the artist's life. Do you want to go?
Yeah, I think I would once again just urge our friends to not appeal to concessions or to change the question, because, because we're not, I know I might qualify that again by saying that it's not, the question is not what matters more, a bad artist and a good artwork, or a good artist and a bad artwork. And there's not a moral underpinning to the question. So we should not appeal to first impression that, the anecdotal awareness of an artist's life essentially bearing a relevance on us answering this particular question, which is a direct binary. And to me, that's a very subject-object binary, right? So the other question is, the other manner in which you change the question, I'm completely in agreement with you that I don't need to know Cy Twombly to see Cy Twombly's work. I'm better positioned to see the work if I didn't know Cy Twombly. I'm in agreement with you. But you're making the assumption that the Cy Twombly work will emerge on its own volition without Cy Twombly. So that's a big assumption, right? That the object would self-emerge or drop down with rainfall. That's not the case. It's the subject that initiates the object, and hence the precedence of the subject is necessary. So in a way, how you're changing the question is, you're changing the question saying, what matters more, the artist or the artwork for the viewer? For the viewer, it doesn't matter. One viewer might go and say, Duchamp's urinal, oh my God, who made this thing? Who got this thing in? Another might say, I don't care, this is a beautiful, crazy object. I don't care who it. That's the viewer's position. The question at hand does not contain the position of the viewer. So we will have to address it for first principles. So to that extent, you've extended the question to answer it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm now on your side.
Oh no,
right
this happened too soon. Yeah. I was hoping that we could continue the disagreement for a bit longer. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, just Steph. So I have one question for you. So which one would you save, or the artist or the artwork?
I'm still thinking about the artwork because the way you describe it, you think that the artist. Yeah, of course before we making sculpture, we did lots of research and trying different material. But when the audience come to see my work, I never really want them to know my biography or where I come from. I want them to see the materiality that what they see. I got lots of glass object, but I just want them to see the purity of the material that I'm using. So I don't really care that the artist the research is more important, or the material that you try, but still when you look at it, even you are not art background, you just look at how beautiful, how it just kind of give you a surprise on it. So the artwork can be more important than the artist.
I've just got a short point because we could settle this right now. There's a lot of art in this building, and we could set fire to it and just see what happens.
Let's do it. Yeah. Let's do it. Yeah. But Steph, don't you think it's a little bit too like a cold-blooded, just to save our piece instead of a real human being? No.
I mean, if you have more time, you just grab everyone together.
Yeah, but you don't have any time. You just have 10 seconds. Or if it's not human, if it's a puppy or a cat. Yeah. So what you gonna do, right?
But maybe the artists can save themselves, and therefore then we do have to save the artworks because they don't have legs. Yeah. Sorry, I'm switching now.
No, I was actually also gonna say the same thing about. I think the only argument that could be made there is that the art, the person in this, if they are healthy, they have the agency to be able to leave the building. So actually the artwork is the helpless object that is inanimate. But yeah, I don't want to meddle too much. But then maybe I will just kind of specify the question a little bit more as the moderator to kind of shift the conversation a little bit. I think what interests me in this, in the disagreement you had, like not on the question, but about the question and how we phrase it, I think there is like, as I said earlier, I think there is like a time frame that we can agree on or like kind of work with. And in that, how would, like in the case of like Jitish, for instance, like how would your answer change if we think of this today, considering the abundance of artworks around us? Like there is, for instance, like the Met, I believe, has like over 1 million objects in their collection, which they would never be able to exhibit. And so actually, I cannot remember now which artist this was, but I think in this, I don't want to give the wrong anecdote, but there was an artist who was arguing for artists to stop making artworks for a year, or like to have a collective break as well. So how would you modify your answer, considering that there are many artworks that now exist, and this is our starting point. Like we have this conversation in this day and time, rather than a completely abstract thought experiment.
Sorry, Jem. Would this also then mean one is extending the question? Because then it would say that what matters more, the artist or the artwork, in a scenario where there are too many artworks, right? So in a way, trying to stay within the scope of your question, which is actually an interesting question. I mean, its idiosyncrasy is in this fact that it appears to be an illusion. And if I participate in the illusion, I would, of course, be in agreement with both of you, and my first impression is all the same. In front of a site-formally work, I don't want to stand around my work if I'm having an exhibition. All that is true. You retreat from it. But does the subject precede the object? Yes. And I'm not saying this as in honor of the subject, the artist. I'm saying this in honor of the primary impulse, which is a life force, an energetic field of meaning that the artist pursues to make the object. So in fact, it would be dishonoring that vital intelligence that erupts in an artist. And to that extent, it would also mean that, if there are so many artworks in the Met, in awareness of that, what does the artist do with this impulse? Does the impulse commit suicide in the artist? Or is there is there an extinction plan for this? No, then you pursue that, right? So it's always so my defense is really for that subjective position, from which even the desire for you to walk away from your work comes from. So that the entire materiality of your work can speak to the audience. Hence you move, right? That decision is a subjective decision, and that precedes everything else.
Yeah, I'm just like, I don't know, like hesitated at the same time.
I think it's just I just think to have this kind of debate is we for me personally I just feel like I need to think about it's like how I started, how I decided to be an artist, and at the very starting point, I think, okay, I just want to create something, and I never had a concept or notion about what it's going to be like, for being an artist, or does it mean anything like, okay, if artist as a lifestyle or you're a very special type of way of living. No, I'm just thinking about, I was just thinking about, okay, I just want to make something. I just want to express myself. And but so I think that's probably that's the starting point for every artist, right? I don't believe that, if there's an artist, but I have to say, probably nowadays there's a lot of artists, they just want to be, okay, I want to be a celebrity. Yeah, and I have to say, we have that situation nowadays. And And I think, you know, if we go back to the raging fire in the museum question, you know, I think it's almost like two questions at the same time. You know, it's like so one Steph raised about this question. I was like, you know, no matter if it's a human being or just like I said, it's a cat or puppy, I think I'll definitely I'll be against myself. I'm not gonna save the art piece. I'm gonna save the living thing. You know, the life. But I think that doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that, you know, the art piece is less important than a living thing. You know, because, you know, a raging fire in the museum is it's a super extreme situation. And I think this world right now is already so human-centric, and I think, yeah, I think, you know, probably it's about a time that we just don't take ourselves that matters, you know. And but at the same time, I have to say, there's another situation is, you know, the artist as a thinker or artist as an activist. You know, I think in that case, it looks like, you know, the artist is much more important, because for that kind of artist, probably they don't have the stereotype of object-wise artworks. But I have to say, their thoughts, their ideas, or their actions actually is the piece of art, right? Is their artworks. And but sometimes it's just you know, mixed up together, the person and objects, or the creation. So yeah, so I still believe that, you know, what they create, what they expressed is much more important. But without their thoughts or ideas, you know, this person, if this is just an image of a famous artist, I think that's pretty vague. Yeah. So, yeah. I believe that man is an artist. He's a great artist because he has something inspirational. Yeah.
Oh, we're back to chicken and egg.
I totally agree with you, Wang Tuo. I think that the artists, we like, they are doing the work that, like everyone else. It's just like foraging those galleries, grabbing all the fruits. They kind of contribute to society because they kind of support a broader, like an understanding of cultured engagement. So we don't think about them as a hunter. So we're thinking about like normal people, like contribute our like cultural exchange things.
So like you'd have to be an artist but having never looked at any artwork before to make the artist more important. Does that make sense? Whatever. Sorry. As I was listening to that, I've like run out of points, but I've just started thinking of loads of my own questions. Do you think that you were saying about the artists who kind of pursue it just to be a sort of like take on celebrity status, and then artists who do it for the like just the drive and the thrill of making an object, and like does that moral the difference in that moral pursuit change the artwork? And but, therefore, does it mean the artist?
But I think it'd be important just to honor the contract of the stage, that we stay within the within the premise of neither moralistic judgment or assumptions, right? I mean, none of the terminologies that you used actually, you know, whether it's evaluating the honesty or integrity or any of those themes, which are absolutely, I mean, I'm in complete agreement with you, but they're not the context of this conversation. We are trying to simply understand in a straightforward manner whether the subject and the object, what matters more, right? So I think we'll have to, in fact, resist our temptation to superimpose the question with other questions, because then, already what has been positioned as a seemingly unrealistic, and personally I don't think it's unrealistic. I think it's a realistic question because it seems unrealistic, like all impossible triangles or impossible staircases, they only look impossible on paper. If you take them off the paper, you cannot make them stand in 3 dimensions. Same with our question. It looks flat on a screen, but if you really analyze it and ask yourself, where did the artwork come from? You realize that the subjective domain is the groundswell from where the artwork has emerged. So, but if there is a counter to that, it'd be quite interesting to see if artworks have ever auto-produced other artworks. No, there's always, in fact, even the analogy of the activist is very, very interesting, because there too, it is the impulse, right? Or your impulse to join art school, which you spoke about, your first desire to make a certain kind of artwork. All of them come from a sequence of subjective positions. The end result is the artwork we see from you. So, so it would be, when you would have to take away the equation of the birth of the art object itself to make any of the other claims in a way,
I just remembered something else. Several years ago when I did my research about the archives during the Cultural Revolution, I think there's one thing I found was very interesting is because we believe that during the Cultural Revolution in China we only have like a mainstream art, the form of mainstream art. It's like a socialist realism, and but what I discovered that actually during that time we have a lot of underground artists like poets, like musicians and writers. And but those people, they have to be anonymous, they have to be underground, they have to be hidden, because if people know that okay, we have such an artist during that time, they'll be in such a danger. And but the funny thing is, they have their artworks, passed on, between people. For instance, there's a famous novel called The Second Handshake. It's written by a writer, Zhang Yang, and that book is like a manuscript. It's not even impossible to be printed out, but it's like a passed from one person to another, and people just copy the book by handwriting. So actually during that time, we can clearly see that there's no such a artist existing, because they have to be hidden, just like I said. But if you look at that time, who was the artist at that time? They have a lot of big name artists, right? And they work for the government. And do we believe they're creating art? No. And are they like making impacts for the society? No, they're just doing propaganda thing, right? And but because we have that kind of manuscript, the handwritten books, like passed over 2 decades from one person to another, and eventually it probably they reached like millions of people. So after the Cultural Revolution, from the starting of the 80s, and we have the scholar literature, we have the New Enlightenment movement. So I think, probably just because 1 or 2 books, and so I think in some like extreme situation, and sometimes I just imagine, probably we're about to reach that similar situation in probably near future, and what can give people more inspiration. It's not going to be a legendary story or the gossip of any famous artist. So it's going to be when you look at a piece of art, when you look at when you watch a film, when you look at a painting, and you get encouragement, and I think that's something can make this civilization of human being pushing forward. So, yeah.
But that's again from the perspective of the viewer, right? It's a third-person perspective. Where did the artwork come from?
Yeah. So Yeah, I'm totally agree with you. Yeah,
It's
yeah. For this part, I'm on your side.
I was thinking when you were talking about what happens if you don't know who the artist is, and does that like cave paintings and
The
stuff. where
cave,
it's
like
not-
William
yeah.
the Pope hippo.
Yeah.
We could even extrapolate it to the field of AI. We can even probably make it one step removed from human subjectivity, and we can say that if an AI is producing to an algorithmic neural network an art object, or if it's hallucinating up an art object, it is still drawing upon a whole range of other intuitions from which algorithmically its own action precedes what it produces. We can go one step removed as well if you want to go deeper and say that, oh, that AI begins to function because there's a prompt engineer, right, who's prompting it. You can go one step further and say that, oh, there's an intent. So even in that subjective chain, we can go through sequences of recursions within which you'll again see that subject precedes the object, even at the level of non-biological intelligence, right? You can apply it to Duchamp and Joseph Beuys, and you can say, you can take away the role of making of the work. You can assign it to the idea of even recognizing an object, the Duchampian idea of the found object. Even there, that moment of recognition precedes the acknowledgement of the art status of that object, right? Or if in case of Beuys, each of us through every utterance we are making are actually changing the way we think about the thing we are thinking about. And thus, every human being is an artist within a large social sculpture who's reshaping the world, right? So even from a Beuys'ian perspective, that reshaping of the world precedes the world, the art object that everyone is reshaping collectively. So in all respects, I think it's even hard to sort of think of it in any other way.
I think this is a kind of coming to a point that like maybe I will play the devil's advocate just for a moment. I think what's interesting about what you're saying is that I think maybe one thing we didn't explore in this conversation is what we mean by importance. And there is something, because obviously the question has kind of obvious loopholes to be exploited in this conversation. Also, like as like Tuo and Steph also used it, and in that I also find interesting that I think what the other binder we come to is the subject predates the object, but then the object outlives the subject. So actually, in that moment, there's I think an argument to be made about how actually the artwork is, in a way, the offspring of the artist. That's what if the artist is that important, then the artwork is therefore even more important to continue spreading the message of the artist.
I think because I have a direct point to it. I can follow you.
Oh no, I was literally just going to say, but the artist lives on within the artwork. Like even really, which is why I made the remark that this question seems like the poultry puzzle. But it's not like the chicken and egg question. It seems like the chicken and egg question. Because what you're saying is that, which is why I made the qualifier initially, that there's a loop of subjects and there's a loop of objects. The two keep intersecting across generations. So an entire generation of subjects produce an entire generation of objects. That's the question there, artwork or artist. That generation of objects might inspire the subjective conditions, impulses, tendencies, intuitions, insights, inquiries of another generation of subjects that would produce another generation of objects. So they're essentially unlike the chicken and egg, where it is a single biological, metabolic, reproductive chain, which is why the chain of causation is hard to pinpoint. But here it is eminently clear that every generation of subjects harnesses of their generation produces a set of objects. One precedes the other. The next generation of subjects will harness of these generation of objects and subjects. And hence our interest in artistry and the life of artists would produce another generation of objects. So you would continuously have this recursive flow, but it will intersect. And hence we might be under the sort of false perspective that they are actually an illusion. But that's the beauty of the question. I appreciate your question very much, and which is why I'm here as part of this sort of idiosyncratic play, is to really pursue what seemingly looks like an illusory question, but in a way it can take us to a destination. And the destination to me is pretty simple.
It's a site of subjectivity.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Like, I really appreciate all of you being a part of this as well. That like to play this untenable game together in front of this audience. I'm also like before we close, I'm just a bit curious if there are any arguments that the audience would like to make. If there was anything that we didn't address, like any devil's advocates. There is one right there.
Yes, I mean, just what you were talking about, Jitish, this thing of the subject and then the object. And what it seems to me keeps the two together is that the artist takes responsibility for that object. And that responsibility is a very important contract. It doesn't happen in AI. Nothing takes responsibility for anything, and that's why it runs out of control. And then the artist has to say goodbye to it. But the fact that that responsibility has taken place actually does make art, I believe, extremely powerful, or potentially powerful. And that relates to the individual qualities of the work. And you were mentioning the Cultural Revolution and what happened to art at that time in China. We've seen it in Nazi Germany, we've seen it in Stalinist Russia, and we see it in Putin's Russia now. But why is it that these kinds of governments hate good art? Why do they want to control art? Because in some level it's powerful. And it's expressing autonomy, individuality, not being put in boxes. And somehow these people who run these autocratic governments sense it, and they're scared of it. And that's why I got involved with art. I thought if art is so goddamn powerful, the Nazis can call it degenerate. I'm a degenerate. I want as much of that as I can, and I still want it. And for me, that's a sign of good art. Would they call it degenerate? And please, keep on being degenerate as you can.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have another...
Hi. The artwork is more important. So there are many artists, there are many artworks in this world, but an artist isn't important until they make good art, right? So the artist will not be important, will not matter, unless their work matters. So, and their work would continue to go on, and artists, when they die, they will be easily forgotten. And like, there are some artists that I look up to because of their work. But then this week alone, I met some art stars who disappointed me. They're assholes. And immediately, they become unimportant. But I must give it to them that their work continues to be important because it has affected my work. So and I agree with you on the Cultural Revolution stuff, and you with everything you said. An artist doesn't, there are many artists who aren't important in this room as well. So, but their works would make them important. So that's my simple solution.
I'm glad that we were able to create some division in the room. That's great.
But again, it has to be qualified that you're making the assumption that the artwork already exists, right? So that in the assumption, then you follow what you just said. But one may not exist without the other. So if existence is a precondition for evaluating relevance, then the subject precedes the object. So I'm just saying that in defense of
sorry.
Hi, yes. I think it's very interesting, this conversation, but it's also interesting how, Jitish, you've actually also predefined the question in a way, and you guys actually, in a way, Cem, also opened the way. I think the question can certainly be seen as like what comes first and what comes before, but maybe in a way, as Cem suggested, what matters more is really about what is important and what is significant. And maybe that is actually separate from what comes first. I think maybe also in this conversation, it seems like it opened the possibility of thinking, can we have artwork without subjectivity? You know, that actually made me think of it. And maybe, you know, I actually want to ask you how you guys think of how artists are defined and how artworks are defined. And maybe we have situations where, or different schemas where artworks actually would not even be considered as human, but rather divine in some, you know, different schema. Or artworks would be created by nature without humans, without human subjectivity. So I just want to throw it out there and see what you guys think.
Yeah, I think those are big, even bigger discussions that I don't think we will be able to cover in these last 3 minutes we have, but I really appreciate it. Yeah, okay, I think this is a good time to maybe, like, one more? Yeah, okay.
I have a fun question. So I think all artists or people who make artwork is stuff that's made, right? And I've been looking at some of these slides, some of these memes, and I think that artworks are more important than artists because, like, these memes, each meme is like its own language, and, you know, different random people contribute to it to make it sharper. Or like a TikTok audio. I don't know where this audio originated from, but there's like so many people using that audio to make more videos. So I feel like artworks are more important.
Beautiful point you made. Yeah. You want to address any of them? The Davids and remarks?
Would you like to maybe say something?
Just, you know, I think there were really beautiful notes that came from both David and you and the audience that really to look at the world through the prism of impulses. And I think a word that otherwise may not have come into the room if it wasn't for you to raise it, the idea of even a divine question, which of course in our secular art world we may not use it, but I think it's a very powerful question of recognition. And I think to me that only reinforces the subjective terrain of all of human enterprise, right? I mean, we are not moving objects, but we are moving subjects in the world, you know.
Should we take one more, or yeah? We have one in the middle right there.
Hi, I'm not in the middle, but
Oh, sorry.
yeah, I would like to disagree with Jitish once again. Sorry, but the question is, what matters more, the artist or the artwork? And when we are talking about impulses, the artwork is not made, so the other part is not existent. That's what I would like to say. And also, I'm really curious why no one brought up Roland Barthes, the death of the author, because I think it gives us one possible way of argumentation why the artwork is more important than the artist. Yeah.
And there was one final statement, I think, next to the last speaker.
So I think when the artwork is made genuinely as an expression, it's naturally a reaction to our time. And like maybe even you realize sometimes you come up with an idea and you see someone else did it after like a couple of weeks later. So I believe that artists, even in the times where there were no internet, we all influenced by the current things, right? So we all kind of come up with artwork that is similar to each other regardless of who made it. So in this case, artwork is more important because, you know, artist is not, let me see. Yeah, because artist is irrelevant. Yeah, because the artwork is the product of our time, and our time kind of demands a type of artwork. So regardless of who did it, we will come up with same ideas anyway. Therefore, artist is irrelevant.
One more, okay.
Hi. When you speak about subject and object, I feel like it kind of disregards performance art. Like when the subject also becomes the object, and how do you exactly sell an experience or a performance compared to an actual sculpture? Does it mean because it has more temporality, its value decreases?
I don't know if you're here at the onset, because I did speak about, any of these pursuits, any artistic, intellectual pursuit begins at a subjective level. We can assume, then we say we don't care who the artist was. That's a different question. That's as a viewer, right? But we are making a prior assumption that the artwork exists. What one is saying, we are actually trying to ask a very straightforward question. It's not a moralistic question. It's not an evaluative question. The question is a direct question between a subject and an object. So whether it's a piece of performance or launching a spacecraft to Mars, it's the same intent that precedes a sequence of actions that produces the artwork, produces the performance, produces the poem, a reflection on the world, a reflection of our times. And once again, we all would appreciate bad or good art differently. That's a different point. That's an evaluative point. But I think within the scope of this question, what triggers the making of the work? And is it located in a world of objects or in a world of subjects, is the question.
And I think that's a great ending to this. I'm very glad that you were all a part of this. Thank you so much. And also thank you so much to Stephanie and Emma, our translators, the production team as well, for realizing this. Thank you. And okay, we are late on time, but can we take a final vote on who is pro artworks after this? And who's pro artists? Okay, interesting. That was surprising. Okay, thank you so much.